Japanese horror can sometimes be extremely creepy and disturbing. Oxhead Village is a Screambox exclusive, and it's from director Takashi Shimizu. He's the guy that brought us Ju-On. So, is this worth it? In a so-called spirit video, a young woman is astonished to see a high school girl who looks exactly like her. Takashi Shimizu has not only given us Ju-On, but he did the sequel and then also did the English language remakes. Now, I remember being creeped out by The Grudge, and not as much as the original, but it wasn't a bad remake. He also did that oddly disturbing movie Homunculus, but with Oxhead Village, he brings in local folklore and the setting of a tiny and isolated area, which then creates chills. The story starts off with a viral video of sorts, where a tragedy happens and a girl in the vid just mysteriously disappears. This kid named Ren sees it and notices that one of the people in the video looks exactly like the girl he likes, Kanan. Now, Kanan begins to have some very unsettling visions, which then causes her and Ren to travel to the town and see if they can figure out what's going on. It sounds a bit Scooby-Doo-ish from how I just described it, but it's less kooky than that and really does instill some gnarly and messed up imagery designed to creep us out. The movie's filled with subtle shots of reflections that just, they're not right. Maybe a reflection will turn to look back at the person that it belongs to. Or you have a shadow of a person that's going to appear and it shows their head as that of an ox. Other times, there are more abrupt and even overt visuals like bodies falling, and many times they're delivered in a way that's spooky, but just not terrifying. They do provide some chills because we as the audience see what's going on, but the characters, they're oblivious to the menace that's looming. For as fun as a lot of the imagery is when it comes to freakiness, the cinematography during this, it can leave a lot to be desired at times. There are more than a few sequences when the camera will pan left or right, or maybe tilt up and down, and the movements, they're jerky and not smooth in the slightest. I mean, it's like a tripod was just a little bit stuck, and the actions are stuttering, which then makes the film look cheaper or maybe more poorly made than it really should. There's also at least one time when the characters are traveling in a car and the light outside, it's just reflecting off the windshield in a way that creates a blank visual area. I mean, not as blank as in there's nothing there, but the sky is clear, so the windshield, it's just basically this bright gray color, and we can't see the characters interacting or anything interesting within the environment. And I do know that's a minor nitpick, but it did bug me because that could have been such a simple fix so that we either have visual interest from the surroundings or we watch the characters carry on their conversation. Now, as far as the story goes, this is fairly straightforward. I do appreciate that there is some foreshadowing that can actually shed a lot of light on certain aspects without ruining the plot. As the movie goes along, especially in the final act, you need to have patience to allow the story to explain itself and the timeline that we're being shown. I mean, it does make sense in the end, but when it first begins, the events and the situation could seem a little implausible, or at the very least, mildly confusing. Now, acting is decent, especially on the part of Koki, who plays Kanan. She's able to just effectively display curiosity and concern, while also being freaked out and disturbed by what she's seeing and experiencing. Now, the actor who plays Ren, though, he tends to overdo the performance, and a lot of his actions are much larger than they need to be, causing them to feel comedic, even though they're not funny. And I liked his character because of the great friend that he is. I mean, even if he's a goof and clueless at times. The movie's just under 2 hours long, and the time does become evident at small periods throughout. When the urgency of Kanan's search is high, the tension and the pace of the story is moving without being rushed. But when that urgency subsides, the pace also begins to slow in a way that doesn't quite drag, but it did make me feel the time. I think some of that is because we're shown portions of the story that involve key characters, but the explanations for their choices and their involvement don't come until later. But the reveal would be absolutely natural if it did come earlier than it did. I mean, they may not have made much sense. I'm trying to stay vague in this area because it's a pretty big spoiler. Now, the story has a lot of potential to be very unsettling, and through a lot of the imagery, there is a sense of dread, and even some chills that are produced. And while the story itself is dark and disturbing, the execution doesn't always lean into that as fully as it could to become a horror that really keeps you up at night. Now, I did have a lot of fun with this, and I was very engaged throughout. There's enough stuff in here to make you tilt your head in questioning or make you go, yeah, that's not right. I gotta go. I mean, while I don't think this is as good or scary as Ju-On, the story at the heart of the film, it's really messed up and it's sad. And it's also effective in creating an atmosphere that's a little haunting, especially because of the lore that's at the center. Now, when you watch this, be sure to stay for the mid-credit scene. While I think it may be an obvious addition, it is still fun to have the story conclude in the way that it does. So overall, Oxhead Village is a solid horror centered around horrific folklore. The imagery that's captured is enough to unsettle and create some chills, but it doesn't become undeniably terrifying. The pace is slow at times, and the cinematography can be choppy, but the overall vibe of the narrative is excellent for a creepy watch that relies on atmosphere rather than cheap jump scares to create fear. There's no sex or nudity, some profanity, and a ton of violence. I give Oxhead Village 3.5 out of 5 couches. So, what are some Japanese horrors that you enjoy? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.